Hey team, it's Conrad Tracy, addiction coach from Melbourne, Australia. For a long time, I genuinely believed that there was no way I could face my trauma without numbing out first. Drugs and alcohol felt like the only way that I could cope, like they were protecting me from the weight of everything that I had to deal with. But what I didn't see back then was that escaping was actually keeping me stuck in shame, regret, and the same destructive cycles that almost destroyed my life. In this video, I'm sharing the real story of why I had to tackle my addiction before I could heal my past, and how getting clean gave me the clarity, resilience, and capacity that I needed to rebuild my identity from the ground up. If you're ready to step out of survival mode and into a life that you don't have to escape from, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hey team, I'm so glad that you're here, and this is going to be a challenging topic to talk about, but I hope that it's useful for you. Now, when I was going through addiction and I hadn't dealt with my trauma, there was a lot of frustrations that I was feeling, okay? I was acting out and I had no idea why. My behavior was out of control. My temper was out of control. I was really triggered by things that I didn't understand. I was using drugs and alcohol to mask all of these emotions. So it was like the only way that I could temper myself. I was really unaware of the depth of what had happened. I had no self-awareness and I didn't really understand what was going on for me. It was so frustrating and I had no way of dealing with it. Now, the big mistakes that I made, I just lent into drugs and alcohol to create dopamine and connection. I used them to open up, or at least I thought that's what I was doing. I used them to be okay with relationships. I used them to be okay with social situations. I literally used them to do everything that I had trouble with because I had this unresolved trauma. Now, the big metaphor here, and this is really important. I don't know if you've ever heard of the saying, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I think about addiction and trauma like the chicken and the egg. Which one comes first, or which one do you have to tackle first? Now, I got some really good guidance when I was on my journey. And the person that said this to me, they said, Conrad, you'll be better placed to deal with trauma if you're really, really strong and you've got a great foundation. And I trusted this person, so I said, okay, I'm going to tackle the addiction first, build my capacity, and then I'm going to work on this trauma. Now, the deep versus the shallow work here. I thought that I had a drug addiction, okay? And what I had was repressed trauma. Realizing that and then dealing with the trauma was the deep work that I had to do. Now, I will credit rehab for this, and I don't credit rehab for a lot, but I went in there angry and addicted to drugs, and I came out of there after some incredible hypnotherapy, realizing that I had been through severe childhood trauma. And it was a deep relief, and I know that might sound weird because I was like, oh, everything makes sense now, right? But then it was also shattering. It was like my world had just collapsed because I couldn't believe that this had happened. And it was so horrific that my mind had just gone, you know what, we're just gonna box that up and we're gonna put it back there and we're not gonna allow you to be able to deal with it, right? So it was protecting me from it. In terms of how I fixed it, okay, again, I chose which one to tackle first. I said, I'm going to beat this addiction. I'm going to get well. I'm going to get strong. And then I'm going to tackle my trauma. And a big thing which I teach, I didn't know the terminology for it back then, but what I would call it today is capability versus capacity. Okay. Capability is everything that I know, everything I'm capable of, all of the historical knowledge and depth that I have, versus capacity, which is what I have in the tank today to get the job done. It's like the charge on the battery. And back then I had very, very little capacity because I had been smashing myself with drugs and alcohol. I knew that I was very capable, but I had very low capacity. So I thought, I'm going to work on my capacity. Now, one of the most crucial things that I developed, and I coined this, I came up with it, and I use it with all of my clients. I call it the later bucket. And I'm going to explain it to you in just a minute. But what I want to do first is show you a little model that's really, really relevant to this stuff. Now, for me, And this just might be me, but like I needed certain things to help me along this journey. I needed tools, I needed frameworks, and I needed to be able to come into a place where I was accountable, I had community, and I had a sense of connection, right? So these things were critical to me. And last week, I don't know if you saw it, but we talked about, I guess, opening up, right? And what I want to talk about today, right, is more in the show up category, okay? And what I teach now and what I went through and kind of developed myself through that process was really coming into a place where I had accountability, okay? I had frameworks, I had community, and I had consistency, okay? So having these things in place and knowing how to spell them really, really helped me to break the cycle of addiction, right? So I learned here how to finish what I start. I learned how to do things and develop habits that stick and get results. And I learned that other people were going through the exact same thing that I was going through, okay? And then I made myself accountable to those people. And with that accountability, with the frameworks, with the consistency, and with the community, I was actually able to break the cycle of addiction. Okay, so what I teach now is very, very similar. Last week we talked about opening up. This week we're really talking about showing up, which is the practical application of these things. Okay, what am I going to do each week, each day, each month, each year to make sure that I stay on this path? Now, I said to you before, I developed this little tool called the later bucket. And this is one that I use all of the time. So remember, we're on this journey, okay? And we want to get from here up to here. And we might be walking along and, you know, doing really well. And then something comes in that is really hard to deal with, okay? It might be an environmental trigger around your trauma. It might be someone reminding you of it. It might be, you know, something that looks and feels like it. Or it just might be something that you have to deal with that's hard in life. So what I did was like, well, I'm just going to show up, okay? And I'm really hell-bent on focusing on that goal. I want to get up there. So what I did is I developed this little bucket and I called it the later bucket. So every time something came along that I didn't have the capacity to deal with, I just put it in the later bucket, okay? And what I said to it is, I didn't say I'm ignoring you. I didn't say I can't deal with you. I didn't say this is too hard. I said, I see you, right? I hear you. And I'm gonna deal with you later, okay? Because right now I don't have the capacity. I don't have enough in my battery. I'm running at 15%, okay? But I'm not ignoring you, yeah? And that was critical, okay? And then what happened is I kind of got up to here and I had a few things in my later bucket, okay? There was probably like 6 or 7 things that I needed to work through. My trauma was one of them and a lot of things that were encompassed in that. And the great news is that when I kind of got to the top, when I had beat the addiction, I had the ability to go back into that later bucket and deal with all of the stuff that I had to work through. Now, I've used this framework so successfully with people. I meet them and on day one, they're like, all of this stuff has happened and I've got to deal with this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, all you have to deal with is showing up, doing things with consistency, coming into the framework, being part of the solution, being accountable, and being part of this community. And you put one foot in front of the other until we build up your capacity. And along the way, when things come in that you can't deal with or feel too big, you tell me. And we're going to put those in the later bucket and we're going to write them down. We're going to acknowledge them. We're not going to ignore them. And then when we have the strength, we're going to go back and deal with it all. The story that comes to mind, and this guy's incredible. His name is and he is in the circuit breaker at the moment. He's been with me for almost a year and a half. Really bad trauma. really deep and enmeshed drug addiction, right? Which started in line with this trauma. He knew about it. He knew he had to deal with it, but he knew that he couldn't deal with it in his current state. He couldn't go through court. He couldn't go through the media. He couldn't go through conversations with family if he was on drugs. So what he did is he came into this program, he came into the circuit breaker, he came into the frameworks, the accountability, the consistency, the routine. He worked on his addiction, he worked on his relationships, he worked on consistency, he worked on his attitudes and his perspectives, and just did the most amazing work. And then when it came time, he said, you know what, Conrad, I've got the strength. I'm going to push the button on this and I'm going to go and get it done. And he's done that. And I'll be honest with you, there was a dip. It was hard, but he had gotten so far on his journey. He had gotten so much momentum that he got to the top of the hill. And then when he had that little dip, it really didn't matter because we just picked up and we kept on going. You can't deal with this stuff unless you've got a strong foundation. You can't deal with a magnitude 8 earthquake if you don't have a good foundation, right? Super proud of him. And there's a plethora of other guys and girls that I can think of that have been through the exact same process. So remember, it takes courage to get back to a baseline and deal with trauma and emotions without drugs and alcohol. Okay, you use them to mask everything, so letting them go can be really challenging. That is the best place to start, and it is the best place to build the strength that you need to take the next step. And if you come into a community where there is frameworks, consistency, accountability, and routines, and all of the structure, all of the support, and all of the knowledge, it is much easier to do that then. And then when you're ready, you can go and work on the trauma. Okay, just like I did. I did EMDR, I did psychology, I did body work, I did men's groups. So much work on this piece. And ultimately, at the end of it, where I got to was acceptance and forgiveness. And I talk to people about it and they can't believe that I've landed there. But that's where I landed after years of working through it. And it's the best place because the people that did those things to me, they didn't do them to me. They just picked the person. I was just there. It had nothing to do with me as a person or as an entity or as a spiritual or, any other type of being. For me to carry it around for the rest of my life, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to go through arduous processes. So I just let it go. I practiced acceptance and I practiced forgiveness. And that has been a very, very long and hard process. But I could not have done that. I could not have gotten to that place if I had a crippling drug addiction. I would have made terrible choices. So remember, if you are going through the same thing, I can help you, right? It is important that you make a plan, you know what to tackle, you know what to work on first, and you've got the tools, the support, the community, accountability, and frameworks to work on the addiction. I think once that's done and you've built your capacity, you can get in and you can really do the deep work that you need to do on your trauma and anything else that's happened to you in a historical context. I hope that's been helpful and I'll see you next week.